He asked her for a divorce on their anniversary, but everything went wrong. She thought she was celebrating 10 years of love, but ended up humiliated in front of everyone. An envelope, a cruel smile, and a decision that destroyed her life in a matter of seconds. But when she left that place crying, something happened, something no one saw coming. Because the woman everyone considered defeated was about to discover a truth that would change everything. Celia Marquez woke up at 5 a.m. without an alarm. The right side of the bed had been untouched for 3 weeks. Esteban claimed he was working late and slept on the sofa not to wake her. But Celia had found women's perfume on one of his shirts and a hotel receipt in his pant pocket. Still, today was different. 10 years married, a whole decade. He had booked a table at Crimson Sky, the restaurant they had never visited, because a dinner there cost what she earned in a week caring for the elderly. She showered slowly. She put on the blue dress she kept wrapped in plastic at the back of her closet. She didn't have matching shoes, but she painted her lips a pale pink and brushed her hair until it shone. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see elegance. She saw hope, and that was more dangerous. She stopped by her mother's house before heading downtown. Doña Consuelo was in her usual chair, her swollen hands resting on an embroidered cushion she had made 30 years ago. Seeing Celia dressed up, the old woman pressed her lips until they almost disappeared. "You look beautiful, my daughter. Too beautiful for that man." Celia knelt in front of her and rested her head on her lap. "Mom, maybe today everything will change. Maybe Esteban will remember who we used to be." Consuelo caressed her daughter's hair with fingers twisted by arthritis. "Men don't forget who they were, Celia. They just stop pretending." But Celia had already stood up, kissing her mother's forehead. "You'll see, Mom, tonight will be different." Crimson Sky occupied the 12th floor of a glass tower. The elevator smelled of expensive perfume and leather. When the doors opened, Celia entered a world of golden lights, white tablecloths, and the polite murmur of people who never had to check the price before ordering. A waitress with her hair pulled back in a perfect bun greeted her with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Reservation: Celia Marquez, Esteban Marquez's table. The girl checked her list and guided her through the tables to one by the windows. But Esteban wasn't alone. Rebecca Marquez, his mother, sat with a straight back and dark red hair that looked like spilled wine. Beside her was a pale-skinned blonde woman, dressed entirely in beige, with the kind of cold beauty seen in architecture magazines, Miranda Sterling. And across from her, an older man with light eyes like dirty ice, Don Arturo Sterling. Celia stopped midway. Esteban rose from his chair and motioned with his hand. "Darling, come. I want to introduce you to some people." His voice sounded different. It wasn't his husband's voice. It was the voice he used when selling properties. Celia walked to the table and sat in the only empty chair, the one farthest from the window. Rebecca greeted her with a minimal nod. Miranda barely smiled, but her eyes scanned Celia's dress, like someone inspecting a stain. Don Arturo didn't look up from his glass of red wine. No one spoke to her. The conversation continued as if she were part of the furniture. Esteban talked about historic zones, old houses being renovated, neighborhoods that would soon be worth triple. Miranda nodded, slowly crossing her legs. Rebecca laughed at the exact moments, touching her son's arm every time he said something that sounded intelligent. Don Arturo cut his meat unhurriedly, chewing slowly, listening to everything without saying almost anything. Celia looked at her empty plate. The waitress hadn't brought her a menu. No one had asked her what she wanted to drink. It was as if she had arrived by mistake. Then he stood up, took his wine glass, and raised it high. The restaurant fell silent. "I want to make a toast. Today marks 10 years since I married Celia." Celia's heart leaped. Maybe it had all been a test. Maybe the kind words would come now. 10 years is a long time. Enough to know when a relationship has no future. The air vanished. Esteban reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a white envelope. He dropped it on the table, right in front of Celia. "This is my anniversary gift, the divorce papers, because I finally understood that I married someone who was never going to grow with me." Celia opened the envelope. Her fingers didn't tremble. She simply couldn't feel her hands. Inside were documents full of legal words and a line at the bottom awaiting her signature. Everything was ready. He had planned it. He had chosen this place, this date, these witnesses. "I spent 10 years tied to a woman with no ambition. A woman who prefers to clean vomit from dying old people instead of building something real. A woman who never understood that I was destined for greater things." Rebecca sighed as if she had just taken off a tight shoe. "I always knew it, Esteban. I always knew Celia wasn't your level. She looks like an employee, not a wife. Miranda lowered her gaze, but her lips curled slightly. Don Arturo continued eating, but now observed Celia with the same expression he would use to evaluate an old building about to be demolished. Celia closed the envelope, stood up slowly, said nothing, didn't cry, didn't scream. She simply walked between the tables, holding the envelope against her chest, while the diners looked at her with pity or cruel curiosity. Outside, the cold November air hit her face. The lights of San Antonio shone below, indifferent. Celia leaned against the glass wall of the building and closed her eyes. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered without thinking. Mrs. Celia Marquez, this is Samuel Ortega. I'm Doña Esperanza del Rio's lawyer. I regret to inform you that the lady passed away tonight, but before she died, she left very clear instructions. I need you to come to my office first thing tomorrow morning. It's urgent. Celia lowered the phone. The divorce envelope was still clutched to her chest, and now Esperanza was dead. The only person who had treated her as if she mattered. Celia arrived at her mother's house after midnight. The door was unlocked. Doña Consuelo never slept until her daughter came home safe. She was sitting in the living room with the TV off and her hands clasped in her lap. When she saw Celia enter with the crumpled white envelope in her hand, she didn't ask anything. She just opened her arms. Celia collapsed against her mother's chest. This time she did cry. She cried like when she was a child, and other children made fun of her broken shoes. She cried like when her father left and never came back. She cried until she had no voice left. Consuelo rocked her slowly, saying nothing, because words are useless when the world has just broken. Celia didn't sleep. She lay on the sofa with her eyes open, staring at the cracked ceiling, thinking about Doña Esperanza del Rio. The old woman lived alone in that huge house near the river, in a neighborhood that used to belong to wealthy Mexican families and was now surrounded by new buildings. When Celia first arrived, Esperanza barely spoke, only looked out the window as if waiting for someone to come for her. But no one came, only a nephew, who appeared every 3 months to ask for money. With Celia, little by little Esperanza began to talk. She talked about her dead husband, her dead friends, a city she no longer recognized, and she talked about fear. I'm scared, Celia. She had said one night while Celia was giving her medicine. Elegant men come with papers. They tell me it would be better to sell the house, that a woman alone cannot take care of such a large property. But this house has my name, it has my memories. If I sell it, what do I have left? Celia had squeezed her hand. No one is going to force you to sell anything, Doña Esperanza. I'm here. The old woman had smiled, but it was a sad smile. You are good, Celia, too good. That's why they are going to hurt you. At 7 a.m., Celia got up, washed her face with cold water, and put on the same clothes from the day before. The blue dress was wrinkled, but she didn't have the strength to change. Consuelo prepared coffee and bread, but Celia only drank the coffee. She walked downtown, to an old red brick building where Samuel Ortega's office was located. The lawyer was about 45, with black hair graying at the temples and a serious expression that wasn't cold, just tired. He shook Celia's hand and invited her to sit down. His office smelled of old paper and reheated coffee. I am very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Marquez. I know you cared for Doña Esperanza with great affection. Celia nodded. She couldn't speak yet. Samuel opened a thick folder and took out several documents. Doña Esperanza came to see me 4 weeks ago. She was completely in her right mind. She legally and notarially changed her will and left specific instructions regarding you. Celia looked at him, not understanding. Samuel took a deep breath. Doña Esperanza left you the entire river house and a considerable portion of her savings to maintain it. Everything is registered with a notary. Celia felt the floor move. No, that can't be. I didn't ask her for anything. Samuel raised a hand. Mrs. Marquez. She wasn't confused. She told me exactly why she did it. Do you want me to read her words? Celia nodded. Samuel took out a handwritten page in a shaky but clear script. Celia Marquez was the only person who treated me like a human being in the last years of my life. Not as a nuisance, not as a signature, not as an obstacle. When everyone expected me to die quickly to get my things, she treated me as if I still mattered. That's why I leave her my house, because I know she will take care of it, as she took care of me. Celia covered her mouth. Samuel left the letter on the desk. I know this is a lot, Mrs. Marquez, especially after. Well, I understand you're going through a difficult personal situation. Celia looked up. How do you know? Samuel pressed his lips. San Antonio is small in certain circles. I already know about the divorce. And I regret to tell you that the news of this inheritance will also spread quickly. Celia stood up. The room was spinning. I need air. Samuel also stood. Take all the time you need. But you should know something important. The River House isn't just a beautiful property. It's a historic house in an area that many developers want. Doña Esperanza rejected several offers in recent months. Very insistent offers. Who wanted to buy it? Celia asked. Samuel hesitated. I can't give you names yet, but be careful. There are powerful people who won't be happy with this news. Celia left the building. The divorce envelope was still in her hand, crumpled and stained with dry tears. The November sun hurt her eyes. She walked to the corner and leaned against a wall, breathing deeply, trying to understand. In 24 hours, she had lost a husband and gained a house. She didn't know which of the two things was scarier. So you're the caregiver who stole from my aunt. Celia turned around. A man about 35 years old stood in front of her, thin, with light brown hair and green eyes shining with fury. He wore expensive but wrinkled clothes. Damián del Río, the nephew who never visited Esperanza, shouted so loudly that the whole street turned to look. Damián del Río wasn't whispering. He was performing. You meddled in the life of a sick old woman and manipulated her to take everything. His voice rose with each word, bouncing off the walls of nearby buildings. Celia backed up until she hit the wall. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just taking care of her. Damián took a step towards her, pointing a finger. Taking care of her, or poisoning her mind against her own family. My aunt was 80 years old. She was confused, and you were there every day, putting ideas in her head, telling her that we didn't love her. A lady leaving the bakery stopped with a bag of bread in her hands. A man sweeping his business left the broom leaning against the wall. Two young women took out their phones and started recording. I never said anything bad about you, Celia said, her throat tight. I was just there when she was scared, when she was in pain. Scared of what? Damián yelled. Scared of her own family? Is that what you told her? Of course you were there. Did you know that if you stayed long enough, if you patted her hand and said nice words, she would eventually leave you something? That's what vultures like you do. Samuel Ortega came out of the building, hearing the commotion. Mr. Del Rio, this is not the place. If you have legal issues, present them formally. Damián looked at him with contempt. Of course, the lawyer is also bought. How convenient. Samuel didn't respond. He just stood beside Celia, firm and quiet. Damián took a deep breath. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand as if he were crying, but his eyes were dry. This isn't going to end like this. I'm going to fight for every penny. I'm going to prove that my aunt wasn't well, and everyone will know what kind of woman you really are. He turned around, walked to the corner, and before disappearing, shouted a final word. Thief! The girls put down their phones. The bread lady shook her head and went into her house. The man went back to sweeping, but now looked at Celia with distrust. Samuel touched Celia's shoulder. Go home, don't talk to anyone, let me handle this. Celia walked back to her mother's house, feeling eyes fixed on her back. Meanwhile, in a glass office on the 20th floor of a corporate tower, Esteban Marquez was drinking coffee with Miranda Sterling. He still smiled, savoring the humiliation of the previous night. Then his phone vibrated. A message from Rebecca. Celia inherited the River House, the Del Rio house, everything. Esteban stopped breathing. Miranda noticed the change. What's wrong? Esteban lifted the phone with a trembling hand. The River House. Celia inherited it. Miranda put her coffee cup on the glass desk. That's not possible. Esteban showed her the message. Miranda read it twice. She stood up and walked to the window, looking at the city without seeing it. We have to talk to my father now. Don Arturo Sterling was signing documents when Miranda entered without knocking. Esteban followed her, closing the door. Dad, we have a problem. The River House just passed to Celia Marquez. Don Arturo put down his pen. He slowly looked up. The caregiver? Esperanza left it to the caregiver. Miranda nodded. Esteban cleared his throat. I can fix it. Celia is sentimental. If I tell her I made a mistake, that I want to come back, she will. Don Arturo interrupted him with a look. Yesterday you humiliated her in public in front of 20 people. And you think today she's going to believe you if you come back with flowers? Esteban clenched his jaw. She still loves me. I can get her back. Don Arturo leaned back in his leather chair. Then do it quickly. That house is the centerpiece of the Los Arcos project. Without it, we lose 18 million in investment. And if you lose that house, Esteban, you'll lose much more than a deal. Esteban left the office with sweaty hands. Miranda caught up with him in the elevator. Do you really think you can convince her? Esteban nodded, but his voice sounded hollow. I know Celia. I know how she works. Miranda pressed the ground floor button. Let's hope you're right. Because if not, we'll have to take that house from her another way, and it won't be pretty. That afternoon, Rebecca Marquez was in her boutique talking on the phone. Her voice was low, venomous. I always suspected Celia, too quiet, too humble. Now I understand why. She was waiting for some rich old person to die to take everything. The news spread. In the neighborhood where Consuelo lived, the neighbors whispered. In the houses where Celia worked, families began to doubt. One lady called to cancel. Another left a message saying they preferred someone without legal problems. That night, someone knocked on Consuelo's door. The old woman looked through the peephole and turned pale. It's Esteban. Celia opened the door just a crack. Esteban stood under the yellow porch light with a bouquet of red roses in his hands and a shattered expression. He was wearing the blue shirt she had given him years ago. Celia whispered, her voice broken, I think I made the worst mistake of my life. Celia didn't open the door. She stood behind it, blocking the entrance, looking at Esteban as if he were a ghost. He held the flowers with both hands, his head down, his shoulders slumped. Everything about him screamed repentance. What do you want? Celia asked. Her voice came out harsher than she expected. Esteban looked up. His eyes were red, swollen, as if he had been crying. I need to talk to you. Please, just 5 minutes. Consuelo appeared behind her daughter, leaning against the doorframe. Go away, Esteban. You've done enough. He ignored the old woman and kept his gaze fixed on Celia. I know I hurt you. I know what I did last night was unforgivable, but I was confused, pressured by people I don't care about, and I made the worst decision of my life. Celia felt something stir in her chest, something dangerous, hope mixed with pain. Why did you do that, Esteban? Why in front of all those people? He closed his eyes. Because I'm a coward. I thought if I did it in public, I couldn't go back on it. I thought it would be easier, but as soon as I saw you leave that restaurant, I knew I had destroyed the only real thing I had. Consuelo took a step forward. That's enough. Get out. But Esteban kept talking, and his voice sounded genuine, broken, real. Celia, let me in. Let me explain everything, please. Celia hesitated. Consuelo looked at her with pleading eyes. No, my daughter, no. But Celia had already opened the door. Esteban entered slowly, as if afraid she would change her mind. He left the flowers on the small table and sat on the edge of the sofa, with his hands clasped, head bowed. Celia remained standing with her arms crossed. Consuelo didn't move from the doorway. You have 5 minutes, Celia said. Esteban breathed shakily. What happened last night was a mistake I will regret for the rest of my life. I got carried away by pride, by ambition, by people who made me believe I needed to be someone different. But I was wrong, completely wrong. Then why did you do it? Celia asked. Esteban looked up, and tears streamed down his face. Because I was scared. Scared of always being the same poor man who grew up with nothing. Scared of not being enough. And instead of talking to you, I let other people convince me that you were the problem. But you're not, Celia. You never were. The problem was always me. Celia felt something inside her soften. Esteban's words sounded true, hurt, human. Consuelo pressed her lips, but said nothing. Esteban continued, I know you inherited Doña Esperanza's house, and I know they're already attacking you for it. Damián del Rio publicly accused you. People are talking, and it's going to get worse, Celia, because that house is worth a lot of money. How do you know that? Celia asked. Esteban wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Because I work in real estate, I know the market. That area is undergoing full development. There are big investors, powerful people who have been trying to buy properties there for months. And when they find out that a humble caregiver inherited the most important piece, they're going to come for you. They're going to pressure you, threaten you, destroy your reputation, until you have no other option but to sell. Celia felt a chill. Who are they? Esteban shook his head. I can't tell you names without proof, but I know how they operate, and you're not prepared to face it alone, Celia. You're a good, honest, hard-working woman, but they don't play fair. He stood up slowly and took a step toward her. Let me help you. Let me protect you. We can annul the divorce. We can try again, and I'll help you handle this. The lawyers, the pressure, the offers, you don't have to go through this alone. And for a moment, Celia almost believed him. Because Esteban seemed sincere, seemed remorseful, seemed like the man he was 10 years ago when he still looked at her as if she were special. But then he added something else. Besides, Celia, a property like that needs serious management, taxes, maintenance, insurance. If you don't know how to handle it, you could lose it. I can help you with all of that. Celia observed him. When Esteban talked about reconciliation, his voice trembled. But when he talked about the house, about administration, about taxes, his tone changed. It became firm, professional, like when he talked about business. "Do you know the people who want to buy that house?" Celia asked slowly. Esteban blinked. "What? No, I know about the subject, but I'm not involved." "Do you know Don Arturo Sterling?" Celia interrupted. "The man who was sitting at that table last night watching me be humiliated." Esteban tensed. "That's different, Celia. Don Arturo is a professional partner. But what about Miranda? Is she also just a professional partner?" Esteban closed his mouth. His mask began to crack. Celia took a step toward him. "You came with flowers and pretty words, but you didn't come for me. You came for the house." Esteban shook his head, but he no longer sounded convincing. "No, Celia. I came because I still..." Celia raised a hand to silence him. "It took you 10 years to leave me on the street, Esteban. But it only took you 10 minutes to come back looking for what doesn't belong to you." The silence was so heavy that Consuelo felt it from the doorway. Esteban clenched his fists. "Celia, you're making a mistake. That house is going to bring you more problems than you can handle. They're going to destroy your reputation, your job, your life. And when that happens, you won't have anyone." "Maybe you're right," Celia said. "But I'd rather face it alone than accept help from the man who humiliated me to impress his mistress." Esteban changed. The fake sadness disappeared. His face hardened. "You were always naive, Celia. That's why you never grew. That's why you keep cleaning up after old people, instead of doing something worthwhile." Consuelo stepped forward. "Get out of my house, now." Esteban looked at both of them with something akin to hatred. "All right, but when you lose everything, when you're left without a job, without a house, and without dignity, don't come looking for me, because I won't be around." He slammed the door shut. Celia locked it and leaned against it, breathing deeply. Consuelo hugged her. "You did well, my daughter. You did well." But that same night, as Celia tried to sleep, her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Just 2 lines. "Sell the house, or everyone will know what you really did to the old woman. You have 1 week." It attached a photo. Celia leaving the bank 3 days before Esperanza's death. Celia didn't sleep that night. She kept staring at the photo on her phone until the screen turned off by itself. Someone had followed her to the bank 3 days before Esperanza's death. Someone had taken that photo, waiting for the exact moment to use it as a weapon. She got up before dawn, washed her face with ice water, and called Samuel Ortega. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Mrs. Marquez, are you all right?" Celia pressed the phone to her ear. "I received a threat. A photo from the bank." Samuel was silent for a long moment. "Don't reply to that message. Don't delete anything, and come to my office in 2 hours. There's something you need to see." Consuelo made coffee while Celia got dressed. The old woman had deep dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled as she poured the cups. "My daughter, maybe you should sell that house. Go far away. Start over somewhere. No one knows you." Celia held the hot cup in her hands. "I'm not going to run, Mom. Esperanza left me that house because she trusted me. I'm not going to betray her out of fear." 2 hours later, Samuel was waiting for her in front of a black iron gate with the Del Rio family crest engraved in the center, the River House. Celia had seen it hundreds of times from the outside when she arrived for her shift, but she had never entered through the main door. Samuel opened the padlock with an old key, and the gate creaked as if no one had used it in years. The house was enormous, 2 stories of light stone with tall windows and wrought iron balconies. The garden was neglected, full of dry leaves and fallen branches. The fountain in the center no longer had water, only dark green moss growing in the cracks. Celia walked slowly along the stone path, remembering the nights Esperanza told her how that garden had been full of white roses when her husband was alive. Samuel opened the front door. Inside, it smelled of old wood, dust, and silence. The floor was made of old mosaic with blue and yellow flower patterns. The walls had wallpaper faded by the sun. There was furniture covered with white sheets that looked like waiting ghosts. Celia entered slowly, as if afraid of waking something. "This is the main living room," Samuel said, removing one of the sheets. Underneath was a dark green velvet sofa, worn but dignified. Esperanza spent her afternoons here reading. Celia ran her fingers over the back of the sofa. She could imagine the old woman sitting there with a book in her hands and a blanket over her legs. They went up a wooden staircase that creaked under their feet. The second floor had 4 bedrooms. Samuel opened the door to the largest one. This was Doña Esperanza's room. Celia entered, and the air tasted bitter. The bed was made with clean white sheets. On the nightstand, there was a half-empty glass of water, a wooden rosary, and a framed photograph of a man with a mustache and a dark suit. Her husband died 20 years ago. Celia sat on the edge of the bed. She remembered the long nights caring for Esperanza when pain kept her from sleeping. She remembered how the old woman squeezed her hand and told her not to be afraid, that God always takes care of those who care for others. Why did she leave me all this, Samuel? I'm not family. I'm no one important. Samuel leaned against the doorframe. Because you treated her as if she was still someone, and that, for a woman forgotten by everyone, is worth more than money. They went downstairs again. Samuel showed her the large kitchen with antique tiles, the dining room with a table for 12 people, the library full of books no one had touched in years. Every corner of that house held the memory of a family that no longer existed. It's not just a property, Mrs. Marquez. It's history, it's memory, and that's why there are people who want to destroy it. They went out to the back garden. There was a stone bench under an old tree. Celia sat there, exhausted. Samuel stood, looking towards the street. This area is called Barrio del Rio. Mexican families who arrived more than 100 years ago used to live here. Now few original houses remain. Most were bought and demolished to build new buildings. Who bought them? Celia asked. Samuel didn't answer immediately. Then, a woman's voice interrupted them from the other side of the fence. Celia, is that you? Celia stood up. An older lady stood on the other side with a floral apron and white hair tied back in a bun. Doña Luz, the next-door neighbor. Esperanza talked about her a lot. The woman smiled sadly. Oh, my dear girl, I'm so sorry about Doña Esperanza. She was a good woman, very good. She didn't deserve to die so alone. Celia approached the fence. She wasn't alone, Doña Luz. I was with her. The old woman nodded. I know, my dear. And that's why she left you the house. Everyone in the neighborhood knows it, but we also know there are bad people who want to take it from you. What people? Celia asked. Doña Luz looked around nervously, as if someone might be listening. I can't say names, but I'm going to tell you something my husband taught me when he was alive. There are people who buy houses as if they were pulling teeth, slowly, painfully, and they tell you it's for your own good, that it's necessary, that it's the best, but in the end they just want to keep what doesn't belong to them. The woman turned and walked back to her house without saying more. Samuel touched Celia's shoulder. It's late. You should go, but be careful. This house is being watched. Celia left through the gate, feeling an enormous weight on her chest. The river house wasn't just an inheritance. It was a problem someone was willing to solve with threats. She walked to the corner where she had left her borrowed car. Then she looked up and froze. Across the street, leaning against a gleaming white car, was Miranda Sterling, dressed in pearl gray, with huge sunglasses and a small smile that didn't reach her lips. She looked at the facade of the river house, as if she already had the keys in her hand. And when Celia saw her, Miranda didn't move. She just tilted her head slowly, like someone greeting a loser. Miranda didn't shout her name, didn't cross the street. She simply waited until Celia got into her car, and then got into hers. 5 minutes later, Celia's phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. I'd like to invite you for coffee. Just you and me. No lawyers, no drama. There are things we should discuss as women. Celia gripped the steering wheel. Consuelo had taught her never to accept invitations from snakes, but she had also taught her that sometimes you have to look the enemy in the eye to know what they're planning. She replied with a single word. Where? 30 minutes later, Celia was sitting in a downtown coffee shop that looked like it was straight out of a European magazine. White marble floors, pink velvet chairs, crystal lamps hanging from the ceiling. Each cup of coffee cost more than Celia earned in 3 hours of work. Miranda was already there, sitting by the window in a beige dress with a perfect smile. Thanks for coming, Miranda said when Celia sat down. I know things between you and Esteban ended awkwardly, but I want you to know that I have nothing personal against you. Celia didn't respond, just looked at the menu, trying to find something that wasn't ridiculously expensive. Miranda ordered for both of them without asking. 2 cappuccinos and 2 almond croissants. When the waitress left, Miranda leaned forward, clasping her hands on the table. Celia, I know you inherited the river house, and I know that must be overwhelming for you. Such a large property, with so many expenses, in the middle of a legal dispute with the Del Rio family. It must be exhausting. Celia looked her directly in the eyes. What are you getting at? Miranda smiled. I like that you're direct. All right, I'll be honest with you. My father and I are working on an urban renewal project in that area. We want to revitalize the Barrio del Rio, make it safer, more modern, more accessible for young people who want to live near downtown. But to do it right, we need certain key properties, and the river house is one of them. The waitress brought the coffees. Miranda took hers calmly, as if she were talking about the weather. "We're willing to offer you $250,000 for the house. In cash, no conditions, no lawyers fighting, no investigations. You sign the papers, and the money is yours." Celia felt the air grow heavy. $250,000 was more money than she had seen in her entire life. She could pay off all her mother's debts. She could buy her better treatments. She could go far away and start over where no one knew her. Miranda read her face. "I know it's a lot to process, but think about it, Celia. With that money, you could give your mother a dignified life. You could forget about this scandal. You could stop being the woman everyone points at on the street." Celia set the cup on the table without tasting it. "And what happens to the house?" Miranda shrugged. "We demolish it. We build something new, something better, something people can actually use." Celia stared at her. "Something you can sell for a lot, you mean?" Miranda smiled, but this time it was a cold smile. "There's nothing wrong with doing business, Celia. That's how the world works. Some people build, others just take care of what others left behind. You've always been the second type, and there's nothing wrong with that. But don't pretend you can play on the same level as us." Celia felt the blow as if she had been slapped. She stood up. Miranda raised a hand. "Wait, sit down. I'm not finished." Celia hesitated, but sat back down. Miranda leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Esteban told me you were always stubborn, that you never understood when it was time to let go. That's why he had to leave you, because you didn't fit into the future he deserved. Some women are born to walk beside great men, Celia. Others are born to stay behind, caring for those who are no longer useful. And you've always been one of those who stay behind." Celia got up again. This time she didn't sit down. She picked up her bag and walked toward the door. Miranda called her from the table. "You have a week to think about it, Celia. After that, the offer drops, and things get difficult." Celia left the coffee shop with trembling legs, got into her car, and slammed the door shut. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, but she gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. That afternoon, when she got to her mother's house, there were 2 voicemail messages on her phone. The first was from Mrs. Mendez, an elderly woman she cared for 3 times a week. "I'm so sorry, Celia, but my son says it's better to find someone without legal problems. I hope you understand." The second was from the Cordero family. "Celia, we appreciate your work very much, but we prefer to avoid any complicated situations. We wish you the best." In less than 24 hours, she had lost 2 jobs, and the week was just beginning. Celia spent the next 3 days calling her other clients, trying to save what was left of her reputation. Some answered with uncomfortable excuses, others simply didn't answer. One woman told her sadly that her family had read on social media that Celia was being investigated for manipulating a sick old woman and that they couldn't risk it. By Friday morning, Celia only had one active client, Don Eugenio, an 82-year-old man who lived alone in a small house near the market. When she arrived for her shift, the old man greeted her with a toothless smile. "I don't care what they say, my dear. I know you're a good person." Celia had to turn away so he wouldn't see her wipe her eyes. That afternoon, she went to the pharmacy where Esperanza bought her medicines. The manager was a woman in her 50s named Rocio, with a raspy voice and ink-stained hands. When she saw Celia enter, her face changed. "Oh, my dear, what a mess you've gotten yourself into." Celia approached the counter. "Rocio, I need to ask you something. You knew Doña Esperanza well. Did she ever tell you anything about people who wanted to buy her house?" Rocio looked towards the door as if someone might be listening. She lowered her voice. "Look, Celia, I don't want trouble. I have family, I have this business. I can't go getting involved in big things." Celia placed her hands on the counter. "Please, Rocio, just tell me if she was scared," the woman sighed. "Yes, she was scared. The last few months she came here almost every week. And she always told me there were elegant men knocking on her door, leaving cards, talking sweetly, but with a hidden threat. They said the house was dangerous for a woman alone, that it could fall apart, that it was better to sell before something bad happened." "Did she tell you names?" Rocio shook her head. "Never. But once she showed me a card. It was from a real estate company. I don't remember the full name, but it had the word Sterling." Celia felt everything beginning to click. "And do you know if other people in the neighborhood received the same?" Rocio nodded slowly. "Don Jacinto, who lived 3 houses down, sold 6 months ago. Doña Carmela, on the corner, sold 4 months ago. Don Refugio held out for a year, but in the end, he also sold. They were all old, they all lived alone, and they all sold cheap." Celia left the pharmacy with her stomach churning. She walked to Don Jacinto's house, but when she arrived, she found only an empty lot surrounded by a metal fence. the house no longer existed. In its place was a large sign that read, "Coming soon, Los Arcos Residences, a project by Sterling Urban Holdings." She continued walking to Doña Carmela's house. Same story, empty lot, same sign. Celia took out her phone and took photos of everything. She didn't know what she was going to do with them, but something told her she would need them. That night, while dining with Consuelo, a brief news report aired on local television. Damián del Rio appeared on screen, dressed in black, with red eyes and a broken voice. "My aunt was a noble woman who was deceived in her last days by someone who gained her trust only to steal everything. I will not allow my family's memory to be stained by an opportunist." The journalist asked if he had proof. Damián nodded. "We are gathering testimonies from people who saw suspicious behavior and will soon file a formal lawsuit to annul that fraudulent will." Consuelo turned off the television with trembling hands. "My daughter, this is getting very ugly." Celia didn't respond. She just stared at the black screen. Then Consuelo began to breathe rapidly, too rapidly. She put her hand to her chest. Celia ran to her side. "Mom, what's wrong?" Consuelo tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. She only repeated between gasps, "My daughter is not a thief. My daughter is not a thief. My daughter is not a thief." Celia helped her lie down on the sofa and called 911. The doctor at the clinic said Consuelo had had a severe anxiety attack. He prescribed pills and told her to avoid stress. Celia almost laughed. How do you avoid stress when your whole world is falling apart? She took her mother home in a taxi. Consuelo was quiet, her gaze lost out the window. When they arrived, Celia helped her into bed and made her chamomile tea. "Forgive me, Mom. All of this is my fault." Consuelo took her daughter's hand tightly. "Don't say that. You didn't do anything wrong. The bad people are the ones doing this." Celia sat on the edge of the bed. "Maybe I should sell the house, take the money they offered me, and go far away." Consuelo closed her eyes. "If that's what you decide, my dear, I will support you, but don't do it out of fear. Do it because you want to, not because they forced you." Someone knocked on the door. Celia looked at the clock. It was 9 p.m. She stood up slowly and looked through the peephole. Rebecca Marquez was standing outside in a black coat with perfectly styled hair. Celia opened the door just a crack. "What do you want?" Rebecca gently pushed the door open and entered without permission. "I came to talk to you, woman to woman." Celia closed the door firmly. "We have nothing to talk about." Rebecca took off her coat and left it on the back of the sofa, as if she were in her own home. "Of course we do, because what you're doing is not only destroying you, it's destroying your mother." Celia clenched her fists. "You have no right to talk about my mother." Rebecca sat on the sofa, crossing her legs. "I have every right, because unlike you, I know what it's like to protect my family. And a decent woman, Celia, a woman with dignity, would reject an inheritance that doesn't belong to her. That house belonged to the Del Rio family, not yours. You were just the employee, and now you're clinging to something that doesn't belong to you out of pure pride or greed. I don't know which is worse." Celia took a step towards her. "Get out of my house." Rebecca didn't move. "Esteban told me they offered you money. A lot of money. Why don't you take it and disappear? That way your mother can live in peace. That way you can start over. That way everyone wins." Consuelo appeared at the bedroom door, holding onto the frame. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned. "Rebecca Marquez, I'm only going to ask you once to leave my house." Rebecca looked at her in surprise. "Consuelo, don't get involved in this. I'm trying to help your daughter." The old woman took a step forward, trembling but firm. "No, you're not helping. You're trying to humiliate her as you always did, as your son did. My daughter may be poor, Rebecca. She may be simple. She may not have your expensive clothes or your queenly airs, but my daughter has never been dirty, never stolen, never lied. And if an old woman who knew her decided to leave her house, it was because she saw in Celia what I see every day. A good woman, an honest woman, a woman worth 1,000 times more than your son." The silence that followed was so heavy that even the wall clock seemed to stop ticking. Rebecca slowly stood up, her face red with rage. "You two are going to regret this. Because when Damián wins that lawsuit, when they take that house from her, Celia will have nothing. No house, no job, no dignity." Celia opened the door. "Out." Rebecca grabbed her coat and left with heavy footsteps. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "Esteban was right. You were always an anchor, and now you're going to sink your mother with you." Celia locked the door and leaned against it. Consuelo slowly walked towards her daughter and hugged her. The two stood there in the middle of the living room, holding each other. "Forgive me, my daughter," Consuelo whispered. Forgive me for all the times I told you to endure, to stay quiet, not to make a scene. I should have taught you to fight from the beginning." Celia squeezed her mother tightly. "No, Mom. You taught me to be good, and that's the only thing keeping me standing." The next day, Samuel Ortega called early. "Celia, I need you to come to my office now. Something serious has happened." She got dressed quickly and left without breakfast. When she arrived, Samuel's face was more serious than ever. Damian del Rio filed a formal lawsuit to annul the will and found a witness. "Who?" Samuel pressed his lips. "Esteban Marquez. Your husband is going to declare that during Esperanza's last months of life, you were emotionally unstable, that you constantly talked about money, that you were desperate to escape poverty, and that you used your position as a caregiver to manipulate a sick old woman." Celia felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't give up, Mrs. Marquez. We still have cards to play, but you have to trust me and be ready to fight." Celia looked up. Her eyes were no longer full of fear. They were full of rage. "Tell me what I need to do." Samuel had his hands clasped on the desk. His face showed not anger, but something worse, disappointment. "Celia, Damian del Rio filed the lawsuit 3 days ago. It's already registered. But the problem isn't Damian. The problem is, who will support him?" Celia didn't understand immediately. "Who?" Samuel took a document from his folder and slid it across the desk. "Esteban Marquez, your husband, agreed to be Damian's witness. He will declare that Doña Esperanza was not in a condition to make decisions, and that you manipulated her." Celia felt something inside her chest break in two. "No, that can't be." Samuel turned to the second page. "He's already affirmed it. Here's his preliminary statement. It says that, during the last few months, you constantly talked about money, that you were obsessed with escaping poverty, that you emotionally clung to the elderly you cared for as if they were your family, and that when Esperanza died, you showed no sadness. You showed relief." Celia shook her head. "That's a lie. It's all a lie." Samuel closed the folder. "I know, but a judge doesn't know me or you. A judge will see a well-dressed man, with a stable job, testifying under oath against his own wife. That carries weight, Celia. A lot of weight." She stood up. "I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to force him to tell the truth." Samuel raised his hand. "No, that's exactly what they're waiting for. They want you to lose control. They want you to seek him out, confront him, scream or cry, because everything you do from now on will be used against you." Celia looked at him, not understanding. "Then what do I do?" Samuel took a deep breath. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Don't talk to Esteban. Don't talk to Damian. Don't give interviews. Don't respond to messages, because if you cry, they'll say you're faking it. If you stay silent, they'll say you have no defense. And if you get angry, they'll say you're unstable. They've already set the trap, Celia. They're just waiting for you to fall." She left the desk feeling that the air was heavier than before. She walked aimlessly through the downtown streets. People passed her, talking, laughing, living normal lives. No one knew that the woman they had just passed was being destroyed piece by piece. Meanwhile, in an office with huge windows overlooking the city, Esteban Marquez sat across from Don Arturo Sterling. Miranda stood by the window with her arms crossed. "Did you sign?" Don Arturo asked without looking up from his papers. Esteban nodded. "Yesterday. Damian has everything he needs." Don Arturo put down his pen. "And you think Celia will give up when she sees your name on that statement?" Esteban shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I know her. She's sentimental. This will break her." Miranda turned. "You better be right, because if she decides to fight and discovers something she shouldn't, we'll all be in trouble, including you." Esteban clenched his jaw. "She won't discover anything. Celia isn't smart that way. She's good, but not clever." Don Arturo finally looked up. "Good people can be very dangerous when you push them too far, and you're pushing her to the edge of a cliff. I hope you know what you're doing." Esteban left that office with sweaty hands. Miranda accompanied him to the elevator. "Are you sure she won't betray you?" He looked at her annoyed. "Betray me? I only visited Esperanza once to see if she was interested in selling. That's not illegal." Miranda pressed the ground floor button. "No, but it is awkward, especially if Celia starts putting the pieces together." When the elevator doors opened, Esteban left without saying goodbye. Miranda stood watching him walk away. She took out her phone and dialed a number. "Dad, I think Esteban is becoming a problem." Don Arturo responded calmly. "Then be prepared to let him go if necessary. People like him are always disposable." That afternoon, Celia arrived at Samuel's building parking lot. Her car was at the back under the shade of an old tree. She walked slowly, searching for her keys in her purse. Then, a voice stopped her. Celia. She looked up. Esteban was leaning against his car. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look guilty. He looked calm. Too calm. Celia felt her stomach clench. What are you doing here? Esteban straightened up. I came to talk to you before this gets worse. Celia tightened her grip on the keys. You already signed against me. What else is there to talk about? He took a step towards her. I signed because they asked me to, but I can still withdraw that statement. I can still help you. Celia stared at him. In exchange for what? Esteban put his hands in his pant pockets. You know for what. Sell the house, take the money, and all this ends. Damian withdraws the lawsuit. I withdraw my statement, and you can go on with your life without anyone pointing fingers at you. Why do you care so much about that house, Esteban? He didn't respond immediately. Celia took a step towards him. It was you. Was it you who went to see Esperanza before she died? Esteban shook his head. I don't know what you're talking about. Celia felt rage rising in her throat. Yes, you do, and that's why you're here, because you're afraid I'll discover the truth. Esteban changed. The false calm disappeared. His voice turned cold. The problem with you, Celia, was always the same. You confuse feelings with reality. You think that because someone treats you well, they owe you something. You think that because you cared for an old woman, you deserve her fortune? But the world doesn't work like that. The world rewards smart people, not good people. Celia felt tears welling up, but she swallowed them. And you're smart, Esteban. That's why you humiliated me in front of everyone. That's why you slept with that woman while I worked caring for the sick. He smiled without joy. Yes, because I understood that staying with you was slowly dying, and I wasn't born for that. Celia opened her car door. Esteban grabbed her arm. She pulled away sharply. Don't touch me. He raised his hands. All right, but listen closely. If you don't sell that house, you'll lose everything. Your job, your reputation, and your mother. Because Consuelo is already sick. Celia. How long do you think she'll last seeing her daughter destroyed in the news? Celia got into the car and slammed the door shut. Esteban hit the window. Don't be foolish. Think about your mother. Think about yourself. She started the engine and drove out of the parking lot without looking at him. In the rearview mirror, she saw him standing there in the sun, his face red with fury. For the first time in 10 years, Celia Marquez had not done what Esteban expected, and that infuriated him more than anything else. Celia drove without knowing where she was going. She passed her mother's house, but didn't stop. She passed the market where she bought vegetables. She passed the church where she had been married. Everything seemed strange, as if the city no longer belonged to her. She ended up in front of the river house, parked the car, and sat there looking at the light stone facade. The windows were closed, the garden was still neglected, but something was different. The front door was ajar. Celia knew Samuel always locked it. She got out of the car slowly. The silence of the street was heavy. She walked to the gate and pushed it. It creaked as always. She climbed the stone steps and pushed the door. Inside, it smelled different, not just of dust and old wood, but of perfume, expensive perfume, men's perfume. Celia entered slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The living room was the same, the furniture covered with white sheets, the antique mosaic floor. But when she reached Esperanza's desk, she knew someone had been there. The drawers were open. Papers that had once been organized were now scattered on the desk. The bookshelf had books out of place. Someone had been looking for something and had done it quickly, without care. Celia took out her phone and called Samuel. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Marquez, someone broke into the house. They broke things. They were looking for something. Samuel was silent for a moment. Don't touch anything. I'm on my way. 20 minutes later, Samuel arrived, accompanied by a locksmith and an older man he introduced as a trusted private investigator. They searched the entire house. The investigator took photos. The locksmith changed the locks. Samuel paced back and forth, his face tense. Nothing of value was taken, the investigator said. No jewelry, no money, no electronics. They were only looking for papers. What papers? Celia asked. The investigator shrugged. Only whoever broke in knows that. Samuel approached Celia. You need to leave here. It's not safe. She shook her head. I'm not going to let them drive me out of this house with fear. Samuel pressed his lips. Celia, this is no longer just a legal dispute. Someone is desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. Before she could respond, a woman's voice interrupted them from the door. Celia. A woman about 60 years old stood in the doorway. She wore a floral apron, and her white hair was tied back with a scarf. Marta, The woman who had worked cleaning Esperanza's house for 15 years. They told me there was a robbery. I came to see if you were all right. Celia hugged her. I'm fine, Marta. Thank you. The woman looked around sadly. Oh, Doña Esperanza. They don't even leave her in peace when she's dead. Samuel approached. Mrs. Marta, do you remember if anyone came to visit Doña Esperanza in the last few weeks? Someone other than Celia? Marta nodded. Yes. An elegant man with a dark suit and expensive perfume. Do you remember his name? Samuel asked. Marta shook her head. He never told me, but I do remember that after he left, Doña Esperanza was very upset. Celia felt something stir in her stomach. What did he tell her? Marta looked at the floor. She told me that there are people who smile like buyers, but enter like thieves, and that she had recognized something in that man, something she didn't expect to recognize. Was he young? Old? Celia asked, her voice trembling. Marta thought for a moment. Young, maybe your age, and very handsome, one of those who knows how to talk sweetly. Celia closed her eyes. Esteban. Marta looked at her with pity. I don't know if it was him, my dear, but I know that after that visit, Doña Esperanza started keeping papers in strange places, as if she was afraid someone would take them from her. Samuel took note of everything. Marta said goodbye with a long hug and left slowly. When everyone had left, Celia was alone in the house. She sat on the green velvet sofa and looked at the high ceiling. The silence was so great that she could hear her own breathing. Then her phone vibrated. An email from Sterling Urban Holdings. Subject: Final purchase offer. Celia opened the message. It was an attached document, a formal proposal for $300,000, deadline 24 hours. If she didn't respond, the offer would be withdrawn. And at the end, a line written in small letters. After this deadline, we cannot guarantee the security of the property or the reputation of the owner. Celia closed her phone, left the house, locked it, and got into her car. She drove to her mother's house. When she entered, Consuelo was lying on the sofa with a cold compress on her forehead. Mom. The old woman opened her eyes. Oh, my dear, everything hurts. Celia knelt beside her. Did you take your medicine? Consuelo nodded. But it's no use if the pain comes from seeing my daughter suffer. Celia rested her head on her mother's lap. Maybe I should sell the house, Mom. Maybe it's for the best. Consuelo stroked her daughter's hair. If that's what you decide, my dear, I will support you. But don't do it out of fear, Celia. Do it because you want to. That night, Celia didn't sleep. She sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee in her hands. She thought about Esperanza. She thought about Marta. She thought about all the demolished houses in the neighborhood. She thought about the old people who had signed papers they didn't understand. And she thought about Esteban smiling like a buyer, but entering like a thief. At 6 a.m., she called Samuel. He answered, his voice indicating he hadn't slept. Mrs. Marquez. Celia took a deep breath. I need you to take me to meet someone. Samuel was silent. Who? Someone who went through the same thing as Esperanza. Someone who will tell me the truth. Samuel picked her up at 9 a.m. They didn't talk much on the way. He drove slowly, as if giving Celia time to change her mind. But she looked out the window without saying anything. They arrived at a neighborhood similar to Consuelo's, small houses with well-kept gardens and iron fences. Samuel parked in front of a blue house with geranium pots at the entrance. Don Refugio Salazar lives here, Samuel said. He had a house in the Barrio del Rio. He sold it 8 months ago. Celia got out of the car. Samuel knocked on the door. A man in his 70s opened it. He was thin, with white hair and tired eyes. He wore a plaid shirt and jeans. Good morning, Don Refugio. I'm Samuel Ortega. We spoke on the phone. The man nodded and let them in. The house smelled of fresh coffee and sweet bread. A younger woman, perhaps his daughter, was sitting in the living room. This is Lupita, Don Refugio said. My daughter lives with me since I sold the other house. Lupita nodded, but didn't smile. Please sit, Don Refugio said, pointing to the sofa. Celia sat down slowly. The man brought coffee in chipped cups and sat opposite them. Samuel told me you inherited Esperanza del Rio's house. Celia nodded. Don Refugio sighed. Esperanza was a good woman, very proud, but good. That's why she endured so much. Endured what? Celia asked. Don Refugio looked at his daughter. Lupita spoke. The same thing my dad endured. Elegant people knocking on the door, telling him the house was too big for a man alone, that the neighborhood was changing, that it was dangerous, that he should sell before something bad happened. Who told him that? Lupita pressed her lips. At first they were different people. A man in a gray suit, then a very beautiful young woman, then another younger man who spoke perfect Spanish and smiled a lot. They all said the same thing, that they wanted to help. Celia felt her stomach clench. The young man was handsome, in his 30s. Lupita nodded. Yes, very handsome and very kind. He brought my dad bread. He asked him how he was, but he always ended up talking about the house. Don Refugio interrupted. I didn't want to sell. My father bought that house when he arrived from Michoacan. My children were born there. My wife died there. But strange things started happening. What things? Samuel asked. A pipe broke, then part of the roof fell. Then someone threw trash in my garden every night for 2 weeks. And one day, a letter arrived from the city saying my house had code violations, and I had 30 days to fix it, or I would be fined. Lupita wiped her eyes. Fixing all that cost more than we had, and just then the handsome man came back. He told my dad that he could help him, that he knew people who could buy the house quickly, in cash, without lawyers. Don Refugio lowered his head. They offered me $60,000. The house was worth at least $200,000, but I was tired, scared, and I signed. Celia felt tears burning her eyes. And what happened to the house? Lupita took out her phone and showed her a photo. A new 5-story building, glass and concrete, luxury apartments. They demolished it 3 months later. Now, it's this. Celia looked at the photo and felt something inside her break. Don Refugio slowly stood up. If you came to ask me if you should sell, I'm going to tell you the truth. Don't sell. Because if you sell, they're going to erase everything that house means, and they're going to do the same thing to another person, and another, until there's nothing left of us in this city. Celia and Samuel left that house in silence. When they got to the car, she turned to him. How many more houses? Samuel gripped the steering wheel. As far as I know, 7. All in the same neighborhood, all belonging to elderly people, all bought for less than half their value, and all demolished in less than 6 months. Celia looked out the window. And no one did anything? Samuel shook his head. They are humble people, Celia. People who don't know lawyers, who don't know how to fight against big companies, who just want to live in peace. And when someone in a suit, with a smile, tells them to sign, they trust because they were taught to trust. That afternoon, Celia received a message. It was from Consuelo. My daughter, come quickly. I feel unwell again. Celia arrived running. Her mother was sitting on the sofa, pale, her breathing short and shallow. It's nothing, my dear. I just got a little dizzy. Celia helped her lie down. I'm going to call the doctor. Consuelo grabbed her hand. No, it'll pass. Just stay with me. Celia sat on the edge of the bed and stroked her hair. I'm sorry, Mom. All of this is my fault. Consuelo shook her head. Don't say that. You didn't do anything wrong. That night, while Consuelo slept, Celia opened her email. There was Miranda's proposal, $300,000, 24-hour deadline. Celia looked at her sleeping mother, thought about Don Refugio, thought about Esperanza, thought about all the demolished houses, and thought about how easy it would be to sign and disappear. She closed the email without responding. Then she called Samuel. He answered immediately. Mrs. Marquez. Celia took a deep breath. I'm not going to sell. Samuel was silent. Are you sure? She looked at her mother. No, but I'm going to do it anyway. The next morning, Celia woke up with a dull pain in her chest. She hadn't slept, only closed her eyes for a few hours, hoping the fear would go away. It didn't. Consuelo was still weak. Her face had lost color, and her hands trembled as she held the teacup. My daughter, maybe you should accept that money. Go far away. Start anew. Celia didn't respond. She just kissed her forehead and left. She drove to Samuel's office with Miranda's proposal printed on a crumpled sheet. When she entered, he was on the phone, saw her, and hung up immediately. Are you here to sign? Celia placed the paper on the desk. I'm here for you to tell me why I shouldn't. Samuel looked at her for a long time. Because if you sign, they will win. And not just against you. They will win against everyone who has already lost. Against Esperanza. Against Don Refugio. Against all the elderly people who signed out of fear and died in shame. Celia sat down slowly. But my mother is sick. I don't have a job, and everyone hates me. Samuel leaned forward. They hate you because someone told them to hate you, but the truth always outweighs lies. You just need to hold on a little longer. Celia shook her head. I don't know if I can. Samuel stood up. Come with me. I want to show you something. They left the building and got into Samuel's car. He drove without saying where they were going. 20 minutes later, they arrived at a small house in a secluded neighborhood. He knocked on the door. A woman in her 40s opened it. She had a tired face and red eyes. Good morning, Claudia. She can tell you better than I can. They entered a modest living room. An older man was sitting in a wheelchair by the window. "He's my father," Claudia said. "Don Ernesto. He had a house in the Barrio del Rio. He sold it a year ago." Celia sat on the sofa. Claudia sat opposite her. "My dad is diabetic. 2 years ago he lost a foot. I work all day and couldn't take care of him. Then he started getting visitors." "From whom?" "From people who told him the house was too much for him, that he needed to sell to pay for his medicines, that if he didn't sell, he would lose everything anyway. My dad didn't quite understand the papers. He has memory problems, but he signed because they told him it was for the best." "How much did they pay him?" Celia asked. Claudia lowered her head. $50,000. The house was worth more than $200,000. But that's not the worst part. Celia felt a lump in her throat. "What's the worst part?" Claudia wiped her eyes. "That my dad doesn't remember signing. Every time I ask him, he says someone came and gave him papers and told him to just sign to fix his house, not to sell it. And now, when we pass by the Barrio del Rio and he sees the empty lot, he asks me where his house is, and I have to tell him it no longer exists." Celia looked at the old man in the wheelchair. He was staring out the window, seeing nothing. Claudia continued, "I don't know if I can prove they tricked him. I don't have lawyers. I don't have money, but I know my dad didn't understand what he signed. And I know the people who took advantage of him are still doing the same to others." Samuel touched Celia's shoulder. "That's why I asked you to come, because this isn't just your fight, it's their fight too." Celia slowly stood up. "Claudia, did your dad sign alone or was someone with him?" The woman thought for a moment. "There was a young man, very kind. He brought him Chinese food because my dad said he liked it, and after eating, he took out the papers." Celia felt rage rising in her throat. "Do you remember his name?" Claudia shook her head. "But I have his business card." "Wait." She went to the kitchen and returned with a business card. Celia read it. "Esteban Marquez, real estate consultant, Sterling Urban Holdings." The world stopped. Samuel took the card and put it in his folder. Celia couldn't breathe. Claudia looked at her with concern. "Are you okay?" Celia nodded, unable to speak. Samuel took her arm. "We have to go." In the car, Celia stared at the street, seeing nothing. Samuel drove in silence. Then she spoke in a low voice. "Esteban not only betrayed me, he betrayed everyone." Samuel nodded. "And if you sell the house, he wins. Miranda wins. Don Arturo wins, and everyone who lost their homes loses twice." Celia closed her eyes. "But if I don't sell, my mother." Samuel interrupted her. "Your mother will be proud of you, because you're going to do the right thing, even if it hurts." That afternoon, Celia went to Samuel's office, her face firm. "I'm not going to sell." Samuel smiled for the first time in days. "Then it's time to prepare, because they won't give up, and neither will we." Celia left that building with her head held high, passed a store, and saw her reflection in the glass. She no longer looked like the broken woman who had left the restaurant crying. She looked like someone who had decided to fight. That night, Miranda called Esteban. "Did she sign?" Esteban gripped the phone. "No." Miranda was silent. "Then we go to Plan B." Esteban felt a chill. "What is Plan B?" Miranda hung up without answering. The next day, Celia received a call from Samuel. "Celia, Don Arturo is going to hold a public event, an announcement for the Los Arcos project. It will be at the Almazan Hotel. Press, investors, authorities, and he wants you to be there." Celia frowned. "Why?" Samuel took a deep breath. "Because he wants you to sign the sale in front of everyone, as if it were an amicable agreement." Celia felt rage filling her chest. "And if I don't go, then they'll say, you hid, that you're scared, that you know you have no defense." Celia gripped the phone. "And if I go?" Samuel was silent. "Then we have one chance, just one, to turn everything around." Celia closed her eyes. "What truth?" Samuel smiled. "The one Esperanza kept for you, the one we've been protecting all this time." Celia felt something change inside her. It was no longer fear, it was strength. "All right, I'll go, but I won't sign anything." Samuel was silent for a moment. "Then get ready, Celia, because this is going to hurt before it heals." She hung up the phone and looked out the window. Outside, the city still shone, indifferent, beautiful, cruel. But Celia Marquez was no longer the same woman who had entered that city crying weeks ago. Now she was someone who knew that justice doesn't come on its own. You have to build it step by step, tear by tear, truth by truth, and she was ready to begin. In the following days, Celia stopped responding to messages. She stopped defending herself in neighborhood conversations. When someone looked at her with contempt in the market, she lowered her head and kept walking. When Rebecca called Consuelo to say that her daughter was destroying the whole family, Celia didn't raise her voice. She just pressed her lips and waited for the storm to pass. To everyone who observed her, she seemed like a defeated woman, tired, broken. Exactly what Esteban, Miranda, and Don Arturo wanted to see. Esteban told Miranda that Celia no longer answered his calls with anger. Now she just said she was thinking, that she needed time, that maybe he was right about everything. Miranda smiled as she drank her coffee in her father's office. It was about time she understood her place. Don Arturo signed documents without looking up. Women like her always bend. You just have to press the right spot. Damian del Rio received a message from an unknown number. If you maintain your version until the event, you will receive $50,000 in cash. The money will be yours the same day, Celia signs. Damian saved the message and smiled. Finally, something good would come out of his aunt's death. Rebecca visited Consuelo one afternoon without warning, with a box of sweet bread, as if they were lifelong friends. She sat in the living room with her legs crossed and spoke in a soft voice. Consuelo, I know things between our families are difficult, but I want you to know that if Celia accepts the offer, Esteban will make sure you receive help. Medicine, treatments, everything you need. Doña Consuelo didn't touch the bread. She just looked at Rebecca with tired eyes. My daughter is not for sale, and neither am I. Rebecca left without saying goodbye. But what none of them knew was that behind Celia's silence, there was movement. Samuel Ortega worked late every night, gathering documents, dates, names. Celia visited humble houses in forgotten neighborhoods, talking to families who had lost properties, listening to stories that sounded too similar. A young, elegant, kind man who brought food, asked about their health, and then took out papers, always the same papers. One afternoon, Celia met Doña Sofia, an 84-year-old woman who lived with her granddaughter in a small, poorly ventilated apartment. The woman cried as she recounted how her brother, now deceased, had signed the sale of his house, believing he was only arranging a repair permit. When he realized what he had done, it was too late. He died 6 months later, without understanding why his house no longer existed. The granddaughter, a 30-year-old woman with eyes sunken from so much crying, showed Celia a photo. My grandfather with the man who convinced him. It was Esteban, smiling with his hand on the old man's shoulder, as if they were family. Celia squeezed the photo in her fingers. Samuel put a hand on her shoulder. Would you be willing to come to the hotel event and tell what happened? The granddaughter looked at her grandmother. Doña Sofia trembled. I'm scared. Don Arturo is powerful. Samuel knelt in front of her. That's why we need you to speak, Doña Sofia, because fear only serves when we are alone. But you are no longer alone. The old woman closed her eyes. Then she slowly raised her head and nodded. I will go for my brother and for all those who can no longer speak. That night, Celia returned home and sat beside her mother. Consuelo stroked her hair as she had when she was a child. It's going to be all right, my dear. Celia didn't lie. I don't know, Mom, but I'm going to try. 2 days before the event, Esteban called Celia. She let the phone ring 3 times before answering. Celia, I need to confirm you're coming to the hotel. Don Arturo wants to close all this cleanly. No lawyers fighting, no press inventing lies. Just you, me, and a fair agreement. Celia breathed slowly. I'll be there. Esteban smiled on the other end of the line. I knew you'd understand. You were always a reasonable woman when you didn't let pride get in the way. Celia hung up without saying more. Samuel was sitting across from her with a recorder on the table. Ready to hear the last message? Celia nodded. Samuel pressed the button. Doña Esperanza's voice filled the room. Weak, trembling, but completely clear. If you are hearing this, Celia, it is because I am gone, and it is because I trust you. I know they will say I was crazy, that I didn't know what I was doing, but I did know. I knew from the first day that man came to my house with his expensive suit and his fake smile. He told me he was doing me a favor, that a woman alone shouldn't live in such a big house. But I recognized something in him. I recognized the husband of the only person who treated me with affection. And when I asked him if he knew Celia Marquez, his face changed. That's when I knew my caregiver was married to a thief. The recording continued. Esperanza recounted how she had started investigating on her own, how she had spoken with neighbors who sold their houses, how everyone mentioned the same young man, how everyone had signed believing one thing and discovering another, and how she decided that she was not going to be another victim. She was going to be the trap. Celia closed her eyes. Samuel turned off the recorder. This changes everything. Celia stood up. Then let's use it. On the morning of the event, Celia dressed in a simple navy blue dress. No jewelry, no heavy makeup, just her clean face and loose hair. Consuelo insisted on accompanying her, even though she could barely walk without tiring. "I want to see you standing tall, my dear, not hiding." Celia helped her mother into Samuel's car. The three people in that car knew that tonight everything would change, for better or for worse. Meanwhile, at the Almazan Riverfront Hotel, Miranda supervised every detail. The lights, the white and gold flowers, the giant screens showing images of the future. Glass buildings, modern terraces, young and beautiful people walking where old houses once stood. The river house appeared in the projections, but it was no longer Esperanza's house. It was a cold, perfect, dead drawing on a screen. Don Arturo rehearsed his speech in front of his office mirror. "Tonight we celebrate the future, a future where the old gives way to the new, where progress doesn't wait, where difficult decisions are made with courage." Miranda entered without knocking. Celia confirmed she's coming. Esteban says she's ready to sign. Don Arturo smiled, then get ready to celebrate. Rebecca arrived at the hotel 2 hours early, dressed in black with golden sparkles, impeccable makeup, and a triumphant smile she couldn't hide. She greeted guests as if she owned the event. Damian was already there too, in a new suit and overly shiny shoes. His hands were sweating, but he forced himself to look confident. Esteban waited in the lobby when Celia entered. He saw her arrive with Consuelo and Samuel. She walked slowly, not looking up much, like someone who had already accepted defeat. Esteban approached with open arms. "Celia, thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy for you." She didn't respond, just nodded. Esteban took that as a victory. The ballroom was packed. Investors, journalists, local authorities, rich people with champagne glasses in their hands, and empty conversations on their lips. Celia sat in a chair at the back with her mother. Samuel stood next to them. No one offered them drinks. No one spoke to them. They were the invisible guests. Then the lights dimmed. Don Arturo took the stage. The microphone amplified his deep, confident voice. "Good evening. Tonight marks the beginning of something great, something that will transform our city. And I want to thank everyone who made this dream possible." He spoke of progress, modernity, opportunities. He spoke of necessary sacrifices and courageous decisions. And then, with a perfect smile, he said something that made the whole room turn. "Tonight we also want to amicably and respectfully resolve a situation that has caused misunderstandings. Mrs. Celia Marquez has maturely and farsightedly decided to transfer ownership of the river house to our company, and I want everyone to witness this act of goodwill." Esteban went up to the stage, took the microphone, and looked for Celia. "Celia, would you please join me?" Everyone expected to see her walk with her head down, defeated, but when Celia stood up, something in her face was different. She didn't look broken, she looked ready, and that's when everything exploded. Celia walked towards the stage slowly. The entire room watched her. Miranda stood by the main table with a glass in her hand and a smile that tried to appear compassionate. Rebecca watched from her seat, her eyes shining with satisfaction. Damian bit his lip, nervous but hopeful. Esteban extended his hand to help Celia up the steps. She didn't take it. She went up alone. Don Arturo offered her the microphone. "Mrs. Marquez, thank you for being here. I know this process has been difficult for you, but I am sure that tonight we can all close this chapter with respect and dignity." Celia took the microphone. Her hand didn't tremble. "Thank you for the invitation, Don Arturo. There are many things that need to be said tonight. And you're right, everyone deserves to know the truth." Esteban frowned. Miranda put her glass on the table. Don Arturo kept smiling, but his eyes hardened. Celia turned to the audience. "A few weeks ago, I was humiliated in a restaurant. I was handed divorce papers as an anniversary gift. And that same night, an old woman whom I cared for with all my heart died and left me her house. Many said I manipulated her, that I took advantage of her, that I didn't deserve that inheritance." The room was silent. Celia continued, "And maybe they were right. Maybe I don't deserve such a big house, so full of history, so full of memories that are not mine. But Doña Esperanza didn't leave it to me because I was special. She left it to me because she was afraid that the same thing would happen to her that happened to her neighbors, to her friends, to so many elderly people in this neighborhood who sold their houses and never really understood what they signed." Don Arturo tried to interrupt. "Mrs. Marquez, I think this is not the place for..." Celia raised her voice. "This is exactly the place, because you organized this event for me to sign in front of everyone, so it would seem like a fair agreement, so no one would ask what really happened." Samuel went up to the stage with a folder in his hands. Celia stepped aside. Samuel opened the folder and took out documents. The giant screens behind them began to show names and figures. Don Jacinto Salazar sold his house for $60,000. Real value $220. Doña Carmela Ruiz sold for $55. Real value $190. Don Refugio García, Don Ernesto Medina, Doña Olivia Castillo, all sold. All for less than half the value. All were over 70 years old. All lived alone. And all were visited by the same man. The screen changed. A photo appeared. Esteban Marquez, smiling next to Don Ernesto. Esteban with Doña Carmela. Esteban at the door of Don Refugio's house. The entire room turned to look at him. Esteban turned pale. That doesn't mean anything. I work in real estate. It's my job to visit properties. Samuel showed another document. Here's his business card. Esteban Marquez, real estate consultant. Sterling Urban Holdings. You worked directly for Don Arturo Sterling, and your job wasn't just to visit properties. It was to convince vulnerable elderly people to sell their homes for a fraction of what they were worth. Miranda tried to get up, but Don Arturo gestured for her to stay still. Esteban raised his hands. I only offered options. No one was forced to sell. Samuel stared at him. Options? Like telling Don Refugio that his house would fall apart if he didn't sell it quickly? Like telling Doña Carmela that the neighborhood was dangerous and that a woman alone shouldn't live there? Like bringing Chinese food to Don Ernesto and then taking out the papers while they ate? A woman stood up among the audience. It was Claudia, Don Ernesto's daughter. My father has diabetes. He has memory problems. You told him he was only signing to fix his house, not to sell it. And when he realized what had happened, there was no turning back. Her voice broke. My dad asks every week where his house is, and I have to tell him it no longer exists, that they demolished it, that now it's a building full of people who will never know that a good man who raised 5 children alone and worked 30 years in a factory lived there. Another person stood up. Doña Sofia, supported by her granddaughter. My brother died without understanding what they had done to him. He signed because he trusted, because he was taught to trust people who smile and speak nicely. And that man, she pointed at Esteban with a trembling finger. That man used that trust to steal his life. The murmur in the room grew louder. Journalists took out cameras. Investors looked at each other uncomfortably. Esteban tried to speak, but his voice came out weak. This is a lie, a revenge because I divorced her. Samuel took out another sheet. Then explain this. Bank transfers, commissions paid for each house sold. For Don Refugio's house, $40,000. For Doña Carmela's, all paid by companies linked to Sterling Urban Holdings. Don Arturo stood up. This is defamation. I will sue everyone present. Celia took the microphone again. You can sue us, but you can't sue a dead woman. And Doña Esperanza left something none of you expected. Samuel connected a recorder to the hotel's sound system. Esperanza del Rio's voice filled the room, old, tired, but completely lucid. If you are hearing this, it is because I am no longer here. I want to make it clear that Celia Marquez never manipulated me, never asked me for anything. She only cared for me when everyone else abandoned me. I leave her my house because I trust that she will do what I could no longer do, tell the truth. The recording continued. Esperanza recounted how Esteban had come to her house 3 times, how he had told her that selling was the smartest thing to do, how he had tried to convince her that Celia only cared for her out of self-interest, and how, on the 3rd visit, Esperanza had directly asked him if he knew Celia Marquez. That man's face changed, and that's when I knew my caregiver was married to a thief. The room exploded. Voices raised, camera flashes, people standing up. Miranda tried to leave through the side door, but journalists surrounded her. Don Arturo shouted that it was all a setup. Damian del Rio tried to slip away, but Samuel pointed at him. And he, Damian del Rio, the nephew who never visited his aunt, accepted $50,000 to testify against Celia and pretend he cared about family memory. Damian shook his head. That's a lie. Samuel showed a text message. Transfer scheduled. Date, today, amount, $50,000. Sender, Sterling Holdings, corporate account. Damian stopped denying. Rebecca sat in her chair, paralyzed, watching her son being destroyed in front of everyone. She tried to get up to defend him, but her legs wouldn't respond. Esteban looked for Miranda. She ignored him. He looked for Don Arturo. The man was already talking to his lawyers, preparing to save his own skin. Celia walked until she was in front of Esteban. The microphone amplified every word. You asked me for a divorce on our anniversary because you thought you were leaving me with nothing. But that day, Esteban, The one who lost everything was you. I lost a husband. You lost your soul." Esteban tried to respond, but no words came out. He just stood there, surrounded by lights and judging stares. Celia walked off the stage, took her mother's hand, and they left the ballroom together as chaos erupted behind them. Outside, the cold night air greeted them like a hug. Consuelo squeezed her daughter's hand. "I'm proud of you, my daughter." Celia said nothing, she just cried. But this time it wasn't tears of pain, it was tears of liberation. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Local newspapers published the full story. Company accused of swindling seniors out of historic homes. Real estate consultant used marriage to approach victims. Humble heiress unmasks millionaire fraud. Photographs of Esteban, Miranda, and Don Arturo appeared everywhere. They were no longer symbols of success. They were faces of shame. 2 weeks after the event, the police arrived at Sterling Urban Holdings offices. Don Arturo Sterling was led out in handcuffs, his head bowed. As television cameras recorded the exact moment, the untouchable businessman was taken to a patrol car. Esteban Marquez was arrested the same day. Handcuffs gleamed on his wrists as officers put him in the police vehicle. The charges were clear: active fraud against vulnerable individuals, document forgery, and criminal conspiracy. The two men who had destroyed so many lives now faced years in prison. Don Arturo attempted public statements, saying he had been deceived by dishonest employees, but no one believed him. Documents showed his signature in too many places. Transfers came from his accounts, and worst of all, several more elderly people began to speak up. Seniors who had once been afraid, who once thought no one would believe them, but when they saw Celia standing tall, they found their own voice. Miranda Sterling disappeared from social events, cancelled interviews, deleted photos from her social media, and tried to blame everything on her father and Esteban, but leaked messages showed that she knew exactly where those properties came from. In one of them, written 3 months earlier, she told her father, "If the old folks don't want to sell nicely, there are always ways to make them feel uncomfortable." That phrase haunted her in every article, every comment, every look from people who once admired her. She had to move to another city where no one knew her last name, but even there, the internet doesn't forget. Damian Del Rio was summoned by the authorities. He tried to return the money he had received, but it was too late. His name was recorded as an accomplice. The inheritance he so desperately wanted never reached his hands. And the Del Rio family, ashamed, removed him from future gatherings and wills. He ended up exactly as he started, alone, without money, and without the family name he so proudly flaunted. The lawsuit against Celia was officially annulled by the judge. No appeal, no turning back. Rebecca Marquez tried to find Celia. One afternoon she arrived at the river house with swollen eyes and smeared makeup. She rang the doorbell, but it was Doña Consuelo who opened. Rebecca tried to enter, but the old woman blocked her path. "I need to talk to Celia, please." Doña Consuelo shook her head. "My daughter has nothing more to hear from you." Rebecca clasped her hands as if praying. "I didn't know Esteban was doing that. I just wanted my son to be happy, to have a better life." Consuelo looked at her with a mixture of pity and firmness. "You knew enough, Rebecca. You knew your son abandoned my daughter like trash. You knew he left with another woman. You knew Celia was suffering, and instead of teaching your son to be a real man, you taught him to trample on the humble. Now your son is in jail, and you are alone. That is the harvest of what you sowed." Doña Consuelo slowly closed the door, without shouts, without insults, only with the dignity of someone who no longer needs to fight. Rebecca stood outside, trembling. Then she walked back to her empty boutique where no one bought anything anymore. The clients who once admired her now crossed the street to avoid greeting her. Her business went bankrupt 3 months later. She ended up selling everything and moving to a small apartment where she spent her days alone, watching television and regretting having raised a heartless son. Esteban Marquez lost everything. Inside the state prison in San Antonio, he shared a cell with men who looked at him with contempt when they learned of his crime. Stealing from the elderly was the lowest a man could fall. Not even criminals respected him for it. One night, as he lay on his cold bunk, he remembered Celia's face the day he handed her the divorce papers. He remembered his triumphant smile, and now, lying in that dark cell, he understood that that had been the day his own destruction began. Meanwhile, Celia began to rebuild, not loudly, not with speeches or interviews. She simply went back to work. Don Eugenio, the old man who never stopped trusting her, recommended her to other families. One by one, the doors that had closed began to open again. Not all of them, but enough. Celia went back to caring for the sick, She went back to preparing meals, went back to holding wrinkled hands on long nights, and every time someone thanked her, she thought of Esperanza. The river house was gradually restored. Celia didn't hire big companies. She hired Don Refugio, who knew carpentry, Doña Sofia's granddaughter, who was studying design, a painter from the neighborhood who had been out of stable work for years. It wasn't charity, it was justice. The same people who had been trampled by Don Arturo's project were now rebuilding the house he could never touch. One Saturday afternoon, while sanding the old windows, Don Refugio told Celia something she would never forget. "You know, my dear, I thought my demolished house was the end of my story, but helping you save this house made me feel like I'm still good for something." Celia squeezed his shoulder. "You were always good for something, Don Refugio. You just needed someone to see it." As a visible thank you, Celia did two things the entire neighborhood witnessed. First, she offered Don Refugio a permanent room in the river house when she learned that the apartment where he lived with his daughter was in poor condition. At first, the man refused. "I don't want to be a burden, my dear." Celia looked at him seriously. "Don Refugio, you helped me fix this house when no one else wanted anything to do with me. Now the house has space, and you need a dignified place. Don't make me repeat myself." The old man accepted, and every morning, when he woke up in that room with large windows and a wooden floor, he silently thanked the woman who didn't forget those who helped her. Second, Celia formally hired Doña Sofia's granddaughter as an assistant with a fair salary and a legal contract. The girl needed work, and Celia needed help caring for the house and attending to some patients. The granddaughter cried on the first day. "I don't know how to thank you." Celia gave her a clean apron and said firmly, "Work well, that's enough." But that same afternoon, in front of all the workers, Celia said loudly, "So it was clear, you helped me when everyone turned their backs on me. Now that I have this house, I want you to know that I won't enjoy it alone. This house is for those who know what it's like to lose and get back up again." Consuelo moved into the river house 3 months after the event. Celia prepared the room with the best light for her, the one overlooking the garden. She bought a comfortable chair, put fresh flowers on the nightstand, and every morning, as she served her coffee, Consuelo looked out the window and smiled. Not for the big house, not for the money, but because her daughter was finally at peace. One April afternoon, as Celia was watering the plants in the garden, she saw a figure standing on the other side of the fence. It was Esteban. He had been released on temporary bail while awaiting his final trial. He no longer wore expensive suits. He wore worn jeans and a wrinkled shirt. He had several days' beard growth and deep dark circles under his eyes. Celia turned off the water and walked to the fence without opening it. Esteban breathed shakily. "Celia, please, I just want to talk for 5 minutes. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I ruined everything, but I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you so much." Celia looked at him without hatred, without love, without anything. Then she spoke with a voice of steel. "Don't waste your tears on me, Esteban. Save your crying for the judges. You asked me for a divorce to leave me on the street, but you ended up imprisoned in your own misery. Look at yourself. Today you are nothing more than a cowardly stranger standing at the door of my empire." Esteban tried to speak, but she raised her hand. "Don't come back. Don't call. Don't look for me, because I am no longer the woman who needed your love to feel complete. Now I am the woman who built her own life on the dignity you tried to take from me." She turned and walked back into the house. Esteban stood there, watching the woman who once begged for his attention now close the door without looking back. And for the first time in his life, he understood that he had lost something he could never recover. 2 weeks later, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison, without reduction of sentence, without privileges. 6 months after the event at the hotel, the river house no longer looked like an abandoned house. The windows shone clean under the sun. The garden had new flowers planted by Celia and Consuelo. The fountain in the center once again had water, and in the afternoons, the soft sound of liquid falling on stone could be heard. It was not a palace. It was not a museum. It was a home. Celia continued working as a caregiver, not because she desperately needed the money, but because it was what she knew how to do, what she loved to do. But now she chose whom to care for. She no longer accepted jobs where she was treated as an invisible employee. She no longer allowed people to speak to her with contempt. And when a family tried to pay her less than agreed, Celia simply left without shouting, without pleading, only with the certainty that her time was valuable. Don Eugenio remained her favorite client. One afternoon, while Celia was preparing vegetable soup for him, the old man confessed something. "You know, my dear, when all that scandal broke in the news, I thought you would stop coming, that you would forget about old people like me." Celia placed the plate on the table and sat in front of him. Don Eugenio, you never stopped trusting me when everyone was pointing fingers at me. Do you think I could forget that? The man smiled with moist eyes. That's why God rewarded you, my dear, because you have a heart that remembers. Months passed. The river house filled with life. Celia organized Sunday lunches, inviting Don Refugio, Doña Sofia, Claudia and her father, the granddaughter who now worked with her, Samuel Ortega, who had become a close family friend. They weren't lavish parties, just long tables with simple food, true laughter, and people who knew what it was like to lose and get back up again. One night, after everyone had left, Celia and Consuelo sat on the terrace, as was their custom. The air was fresh, the stars shone brighter than usual. Doña Consuelo squeezed her daughter's hand. Are you happy, my daughter? Celia thought for a moment. Not all the time, Mom, but I am free, and that is better than any false happiness. Consuelo smiled. Esperanza knew what she was doing when she left you this house. Celia nodded. She didn't leave me a house. She left me a lesson. Consuelo tilted her head. Which one? Celia looked at the sky. That people can take many things from you. Money, work, reputation. But there's something no one can take from you, if you don't let go of it. Doña Consuelo waited. What is it? Celia looked into her eyes. The certainty that you are worthy. Even if you are alone, even if they point fingers at you, even if everyone says you don't deserve what you have, if you know who you are, no one can destroy you. The two fell silent. It was not a sad silence. It was a full silence, like when a storm ends and the air smells of wet earth and a new beginning. Doña Consuelo closed her eyes and sighed. I'm proud of you, my daughter, more than words can say. Celia kissed her mother's forehead. And I am at peace, Mom, for the first time in a long time. I am at peace. Celia's worst anniversary was not the end of her story. It was the day the woman everyone scorned began to be reborn, because sometimes the worst betrayals teach us the greatest lessons, and sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters. Celia Marquez was no longer the humiliated wife, no longer the pointed-at caregiver. Now she was the woman who saved a house, who honored a memory, who defended the forgotten, and who learned never again to ask permission to occupy the space she always deserved. And somewhere among the stars, Doña Esperanza del Rio smiled.